Massachusetts is one of the oldest corners of America, and old places do not simply age. They absorb grief, fear, violence, devotion, and the kind of memory that people try to bury but never fully erase. In this state, history does not feel distant. It feels layered, close, and strangely alive. Colonial houses still stand beside city streets. Cemeteries hold names older than the nation itself. Abandoned institutions still cast long shadows over the places where they once towered. And in more than one location, visitors have claimed that the past never really stopped speaking. Tonight, we are moving through 10 of the most haunted places in Massachusetts. Some are famous, some are quieter, some still welcome guests during the day and unsettle them at night. But all of them carry the same unsettling weight, the sense that something happened here so intensely, so repeatedly, that the atmosphere itself changed forever. There is a particular kind of fear that only old places can create. It is not always loud, it is not always immediate. Sometimes it arrives slowly, through silence, through cold air, through a hallway that feels longer than it should. In Massachusetts, that kind of fear seems to live everywhere, in former hospitals, in family homes marked by murder, in burial grounds, in hotels, in tunnels carved through mountains, and in buildings where suffering was once routine. The stories attached to these places endure because the settings themselves feel believable. They are not fantasy castles or distant myths. They are real physical structures rooted in a real historical landscape. And that makes the haunting claims more unsettling, because the places are still here. You can visit them, you can stand in them, you can walk where others say they felt watched, followed, touched, or warned. So as we begin, keep one thing in mind. Some places are haunted because people died there. Others are haunted because people suffered there. And some, perhaps the most disturbing of all, are haunted because everyone remembers exactly what happened. Danvers State Hospital began as a promise. In the late 1800s, it was built on the belief that mental illness could be treated through order, architecture, and environment. The sprawling Kirkbride-style structure was designed with long wings, tall windows, and an imposing silhouette that was meant to reflect care and structure. But as the years passed, that promise collapsed under overcrowding and institutional failure. The hospital became known for suffering instead of healing. Patients were housed in a place that grew larger in image than in compassion. The building itself seemed to expand the feeling of confinement. Long corridors, echoing rooms, and distant stairwells created a landscape where isolation became part of the experience. Even before its demolition, Danvers had a reputation that felt heavier than its walls. The hospital was not just old. It was remembered as a place where human distress was stored, repeated, and amplified. The haunting reports from Danvers are remarkably consistent. People described footsteps pacing in empty hallways, whispering voices in rooms where no one was present, and shadows moving across broken windows after the building had been abandoned. Some visitors said the atmosphere changed the moment they entered the grounds, as though the air itself had become denser. Others reported chills so sudden and severe that they left without exploring further. There were also claims of figures appearing in peripheral vision and of the sensation that someone was walking just behind them. In places like Danvers, that kind of report carries extra weight, because the setting already feels vulnerable to suggestion. But the repetition of the stories over time made the hospital something more than a spooky landmark. It became a symbol. A place where architecture, trauma, and memory seemed fused together so completely that even after demolition, people continued to speak of the site with caution, as if the building had simply changed form rather than disappeared. In Fall River, the Lizzie Borden house carries one of the most infamous murder stories in American history. In 1892, Andrew and Abby Borden were killed inside the home. The case quickly spread into national news, and the question of who committed the murders became part of American folklore. Lizzie Borden was arrested and ultimately acquitted, but the house itself remained tied to the violence forever. That is what makes the location so disturbing. It is not a castle of legend or an abandoned ruin. It is a family home, a place where ordinary life should have been happening. Instead, the rooms became the backdrop for one of the country's most enduring crimes. The contrast between domestic space and brutal violence gives the house a pressure that never fully goes away. Visitors do not come here expecting comfort. They come expecting something unresolved. And in a house like this, unresolved history can feel very close to the surface. Guests and staff at the Lizzie Borden house have reported a range of unsettling experiences. Footsteps are heard overhead when no one is moving upstairs. Knocks come from empty rooms and walls. Some visitors say they wake during the night with the feeling that someone has entered the room and stopped just out of sight. Others describe sudden coldness in the upstairs hall and a sense of pressure in the basement that makes the air feel almost thick enough to touch. The most frequently mentioned areas are the upstairs bedrooms and the basement. where the emotional weight of the home seems strongest. In a house with this kind of history, every sound becomes suspect, every pause feels deliberate, and every room seems to carry a memory that the living cannot fully access. What gives the house its power is not only the crime itself, but the way the crime seems to have become part of the building's identity. The home feels like a record that never stopped playing. Salem's Witch House is one of the few surviving structures directly linked to the witch trial era. It was the home of Judge Jonathan Corwin, one of the men associated with the 1692 proceedings that turned fear into punishment. That connection alone gives the house a chilling importance. Salem is filled with reminders of the witch trials, but the Witch House is different. It is not symbolic history. It is physical history. The building's architecture reinforces that feeling. Dark timber, low ceilings, tight rooms, heavy beams, narrow openings that seem to close in around the visitor. Nothing about the house feels airy or forgiving. It feels like a place built in an age when fear was normal and suspicion could decide a person's fate. The structure itself seems to preserve the gravity of that period. Walking through it, you do not just sense age, you sense consequence. The haunting reputation of the Witch House is quieter than many others in Massachusetts, but that makes it no less effective. Visitors often describe the feeling of being watched, especially in enclosed rooms where shadows gather in the corners. Others report sudden chills or a silence so complete it feels unnatural. The house does not need elaborate manifestations to feel unsettling. Its atmosphere carries enough weight on its own. That is part of what makes Salem so effective as a setting for hauntings. The town already lives inside a historical mythos shaped by fear, guilt, and accusation. The Witch House sits at the center of that memory, and its stillness can feel almost judgmental. It seems less interested in startling people than in reminding them that fear once became policy here. And once that happened, the house became more than a home, it became a witness. Granary Burying Ground in Boston is one of the city's most famous cemeteries, but familiarity does not make it less eerie. It holds the graves of major revolutionary figures, civic leaders, and generations of Bostonians whose names are mostly forgotten now. By day, it feels like a historic site. By night, it becomes something more difficult to define. The stones appear crowded, the paths tight, and the sense of proximity to the dead becomes difficult to ignore. The cemetery's power comes from density. There are so many stones packed together that the place feels layered with lives rather than merely marked by them. Each inscription belongs to someone who lived through a different Boston, a different era, a different world entirely. And yet all of them remain here, side by side, under the same weather and the same silence. That compression of history gives the cemetery an unusual tension. It does not feel empty. It feels occupied. Visitors to Granary Burying Ground often report whispering voices and the sound of footsteps moving behind them before vanishing. Some say they see movement between the stones. Others describe the unsettling feeling that they are being followed, even when the paths appear empty. What makes these stories compelling is the setting itself. In a crowded urban cemetery, the world beyond the gate feels close. Yet once inside, the atmosphere changes. The sound of the city seems to fade. The air feels sealed, and the shadows between the stones become harder to read as the light weakens. Because the site is so old and historically significant, it functions almost like a collision point between public memory and private fear. People come for history. They leave talking about presence. That shift is what makes the place endure in paranormal lore. The dead here are not just remembered. They seem, in some accounts, to remain attentive. The Omni Parker House in Boston offers a different kind of haunting. It is elegant, polished, and fully alive as a modern hotel, which makes the ghost stories around it especially effective. Founded in the 19th century, the hotel became a landmark of literary and political culture. But one of its most famous legends is that its founder, Harvey Parker, still lingers within the building. That story matters because it transforms the hotel from a place of passage into a place of continuity. Guests have reported voices in empty hallways, unexplained knocks, strange elevator behavior, and the distinct feeling of another presence in otherwise quiet rooms. Some describe the third floor as especially active, while others say the atmosphere changes late at night when the hotel shifts into silence and the polished surface gives way to something older beneath it. The unsettling part is not the spectacle. It is the familiarity. This is a working hotel, not an abandoned relic. Because the Omni Parker House remains active, the paranormal claims feel folded into daily life. Staff and guests alike have reported the sensation that someone is standing behind them when no one is there. Doors seem to move at odd times. Sounds appear in quiet corridors. Some say the elevator behaves unpredictably, while others mention a strange pressure in certain rooms, as if the space holds onto memory in a very literal way. That kind of haunting is especially effective in a place built around hospitality. A hotel is supposed to receive strangers, to make them feel temporary, safe, and anonymous. But if the building itself seems to remember past guests, then the experience changes. It becomes possible to imagine that some presence is never checked out. Some rooms may have been occupied so deeply that the impression remained long after the bodies left. The Omni Parker house survives as both a luxury landmark and a supernatural rumor. Those two identities never fully separate. The Hoosac Tunnel is haunted by labor. Its construction was long, difficult, and deadly, with workers facing unstable rock, explosive accidents, collapses, and brutal conditions deep inside the mountain. The project became one of the great engineering struggles of its era, but the triumph came at a severe cost. Men died in the process of making the tunnel possible, and that loss seems to linger in the stories surrounding it. Unlike a house or hotel, the tunnel does not invite comfort. It is narrow, dark, and subterranean. The mountain presses in on both sides. The sound of movement echoes strangely inside, and even a small noise can feel amplified by the enclosed space. Those qualities alone make it fertile ground for haunting claims, but its history gives the stories more force. This is not just a tunnel, it is a scar cut into stone by human effort and suffering. Reports from the Hoosac Tunnel often describe strange lights, voices in the dark, and the sensation of being followed deeper inside the passage. Some visitors say the atmosphere changes as they move farther in, becoming heavy and almost oppressive. Others report hearing sounds that resemble footsteps or work noises, only to find the tunnel empty. The darkness itself seems to behave like a force rather than an absence, pressing inward and altering the way people move through the space. That kind of story fits the tunnel's history perfectly. A place that claimed lives during its construction could easily become a place where the dead are imagined to remain nearby. The echoing environment reinforces that feeling by turning ordinary sounds into something harder to interpret. The tunnel becomes a machine for unease. And once you are inside, it can feel less like a route through a mountain and more like a journey into memory. Forest Hills Cemetery in Boston was designed as a garden cemetery where beauty and mourning could exist together. Its winding paths, landscaped grounds, ornamental monuments, and shaded trees create a place that feels contemplative in daylight. It is carefully composed, almost serene. But after dark, that same design can become deeply unsettling. The curves of the paths limit sightlines. The trees deepen the shadows. The monuments stand silent, like witnesses that refuse to move. Visitors have reported whispers in the branches, shadow figures near the stones, and footsteps that seem to follow them through the grounds. Some say the air changes suddenly, and that the quiet becomes so complete it feels unnatural. In a cemetery designed to comfort the living, that silence can become its own source of fear. The haunting here is not tied to one dramatic event. It grows from atmosphere, from design, and from the fact that a beautiful place can still feel haunted when night removes its softness. What makes Forest Hills so effective as a haunted site is the contrast between care and unease. Everything about it suggests dignity. Everything about its design says it was meant to be seen, visited, and remembered. And yet many people leave with the same strange feeling. That something moved nearby, that someone stood behind them, or that the cemetery itself was quietly aware of their presence. That impression can be powerful in a place with so much open space and so little noise. The mind starts to fill in what the eye cannot confirm. Shapes become figures, branches become movement. A distant sound becomes a footstep. But even accounting for perception, the consistency of the reports has made Forest Hills part of Boston's paranormal landscape. This is not the kind of haunting that needs to prove itself loudly. It works by suggestion, by stillness, by the sense that the cemetery never truly empties after the gates close. The old jail in Barnstable carries a fear that is almost immediate. Built for restraint, it was never meant to be comfortable. Its cells are small, its corridors narrow, and its materials feel severe. Unlike a grand mansion or historic hotel, there is no elegance here to soften the memory of confinement. The place exists to remind visitors what it means to be locked away from the world. That history matters because it shapes the atmosphere in a way people often feel before they fully notice. The air seems heavier. The building seems smaller than expected. Sounds echo longer than they should, and the silence between those echoes can feel unnaturally attentive. Visitors have described instant dread, along with the sense that the structure still remembers the old rhythms of doors closing, footsteps passing, and people waiting in fear. A place built for punishment does not easily become peaceful. Instead, it tends to preserve the emotional residue of its function. Reports from the old jail in Barnstable include footsteps in empty rooms, voices from unseen sources, and the metallic sounds of movement where nothing visible is happening. Some visitors say they feel as though they have stepped into a memory rather than a museum. Others describe the atmosphere as instantly oppressive, as if the building is still enforcing its old purpose. This is the kind of place where even the architecture feels accusatory. The walls are close, the doors are heavy, the space is stripped down to the essentials of control. That makes the paranormal stories feel plausible in a psychological sense, because the structure already communicates confinement before any ghost story begins. If old buildings hold emotional residue, then the old jail has had plenty of time to gather it, and that residue does not need to show itself to be felt. Sometimes it is enough that the place makes people want to leave quickly. The Mount, former home of Edith Wharton, stands apart because its haunting comes wrapped in elegance. This is a refined estate, designed with intention and aesthetic control. The architecture, gardens, and interior spaces reflect a world of taste and order. But people who spend time there have reported voices, shadows, sudden temperature shifts, and the unmistakable sensation of not being alone in rooms that appear empty. That contrast is what gives the location its power. A grand house can create a false sense of safety. Visitors expect refinement, not fear, but beauty does not prevent haunting. In some places it seems to deepen it. The quiet becomes more noticeable, the shadows become more intentional, and the feeling of presence becomes more difficult to dismiss because the environment itself seems so composed. The Mount does not rely on legends of violence. Its haunting is subtler, more atmospheric, and because of that it feels as though the house has absorbed emotion rather than event. Guests and staff at the Mount have described the same kinds of details across time. A shadow that seems to move just beyond the edge of vision. A voice heard when no one is present. A chill that passes through a room without any clear source. The house does not appear to be aggressive, but it does seem aware, as though it responds to the presence of people moving through it. That kind of haunting often leaves a deeper impression than a dramatic apparition. It suggests continuity rather than interruption. It suggests that the building itself has memory, and that what remains there is not trying to frighten anyone so much as simply existing in parallel with the living. In a house like this, silence becomes charged, and every elegant room feels one step away from revealing something you were not meant to notice. Phelps House in North Adams may not be the most famous haunted location in Massachusetts, but its reputation has lasted because the stories keep repeating. That repetition matters. Footsteps in the halls, doors opening or closing without explanation, whispers heard in otherwise empty rooms, shadows noticed in passing. The details are not always dramatic, but they are consistent, and consistency is often what turns a local ghost story into a lasting legend. The house itself becomes unsettling because it is domestic. A home is supposed to be familiar, private, and safe. When unexplained activity keeps surfacing in that setting, every sound takes on extra meaning. A floorboard creak becomes a signal, a dark corner becomes a possible presence, and silence becomes something to listen for rather than relax into. The power of Phelps House lies in the way it keeps making the same quiet claim. Something here is still active. Local stories about Phelps House often focus less on spectacle and more on atmosphere. That can make the haunting feel more believable, because it resembles the kind of experience people actually remember. A sudden sense of being watched, a noise that cannot be explained, a room that feels different from the one beside it. Those sensations do not need dramatic visual confirmation to leave an impression. And that is why quiet hauntings endure. A place with a huge public reputation can fade into novelty. But a smaller house with repeated accounts can remain genuinely unsettling, especially when people from different times describe nearly the same phenomenon. The repetition suggests that whatever is happening there, or whatever is being felt there, is not tied to one person's imagination alone. Phelps House reminds us that haunting does not require scale. Sometimes it only requires persistence. The first 10 places on this list reveal a pattern that runs through Massachusetts ghost lore. A hospital built to heal becomes a site of suffering. A family home becomes a crime scene. A colonial house becomes a witness to fear. A cemetery becomes crowded with memory. A hotel becomes a place where the dead seem to remain among the guests. A tunnel becomes a monument to labor and loss. A landscaped cemetery becomes a stage for subtle dread. A jail becomes a container for emotional residue. A grand estate becomes quietly occupied. And a simple house becomes a repeatable mystery. Different settings, different histories, different kinds of fear, but the same underlying feeling. The past is not finished here. That is what makes Massachusetts such a compelling map of the paranormal. The state's oldest places are not just old in years, they are old in consequence. They carry institutional suffering, criminal infamy, colonial panic, revolutionary memory, and private grief. That mixture gives the haunted stories their strength. It makes them feel rooted, not invented. In some states, ghost stories gather around a handful of isolated landmarks. In Massachusetts, they seem woven into the landscape itself. The roads connect to the houses connect to the cemeteries connect to the city. And every place seems to point back toward the same realization. History is not silent. It speaks in architecture, in atmosphere, and sometimes in the stories people tell when they leave. And when enough people tell the same story, a place begins to feel less like a location, and more like a memory that refuses to go away. At Danvers, the story is suffering. At the Lizzie Borden house, the story is violence. At the Witch House, the story is fear. At Granary Burying Ground, the story is accumulation. At the Omni Parker house, the story is continuity. At the Hoosac Tunnel, the story is sacrifice. At Forest Hills Cemetery, the story is quiet unease. At the old jail in Barnstable, the story is confinement. At the Mount, the story is presence. And at Phelps House, the story is repetition. Each place carries its own tone, but together they form a kind of haunting atlas. One built not only from ghost reports, but from the emotional pressure of history itself. These are not isolated scares. They are chapters in a much larger story. What connects these places is not merely that people report strange things there. It is that the stories feel attached to the nature of each location. The hospital held distress. The house held murder. The cemetery held generations. The hotel held old prestige. The tunnel held death beneath the mountain. The jail held confinement. The estate held memory. The home held repetition. Each one seems to have absorbed the emotional shape of what happened inside it. That is why these stories last. They are not random ghost tales pasted onto old buildings. They are part of the identity of the places themselves. Whether you interpret that as paranormal activity, psychological suggestion, or the natural effect of historical weight, the outcome is the same. These locations continue to unsettle people who visit them. And the older the place, the more powerfully it seems to remember. If there is a final lesson in Massachusetts' haunted history, it is that architecture keeps more than shape. It keeps context. A building is never just wood, stone, brick, or plaster. It is a container for behavior, emotion, and memory. Once enough pain, fear, or grief collects in a place, people begin to describe that place differently. They speak of temperature changes, presences, voices, and the feeling of being watched. Some of those experiences may have simple explanations. Others remain stubbornly unresolved. But the stories endure because the settings themselves are real. That is what makes them believable. You are not hearing about a mythic ruin on the edge of the world. You are hearing about a hospital, a house, a cemetery, a hotel, a tunnel, a jail, an estate, and a home. Places woven into ordinary life. Places where ordinary people once lived, worked, suffered, and died. That ordinariness is what makes the haunting so unsettling. Because once a place becomes ordinary, people stop questioning what it is capable of holding. A house becomes a home until something makes it feel unfamiliar. A cemetery becomes a landmark until the dead seem closer than expected. A hospital becomes a building until the memory of suffering returns to it. And that moment of shift is what these haunted places seem to produce again and again. Not every visitor will feel it. Not every witness will interpret it the same way. But the stories from Massachusetts continue because enough people have walked these grounds and come away changed by the experience. Not always terrified. Sometimes just uneasy. Sometimes reflective. Sometimes convinced they heard something they should not have heard. That lingering uncertainty is part of the power. It means the place still has room to act on the imagination. The best haunted locations do not only frighten, they reframe. After hearing about Danvers, the hospital no longer feels like a ruin. After hearing about the Lizzie Borden house, the home feels charged. After hearing about the Witch House, Salem feels older and more severe. After hearing about Granary Burying Ground, Boston feels more crowded with memory than it appears. After hearing about the Omni Parker house, a hotel hallway feels different. After hearing about Hoosac Tunnel, darkness feels heavier. After hearing about Forest Hills Cemetery, silence feels less peaceful. After hearing about the old jail in Barnstable, confinement feels almost tangible. After hearing about the Mount, elegance feels watchful. And after hearing about Phelps House, the ordinary house next door feels less ordinary. That is the real effect of haunted history.